So, you're interested in buying, or you've already bought the precon deck of Virtue and Valor and are looking how to make it the best deck it can be without worries about limitations, budgets, or anything like that? Well, don't worry, Scotty and I have got you covered. It's good, but we can make it better. Let's have a look at the best way that you can upgrade this wonderful precon deck. Virtue and Valor is a great enchantment-based deck, and it's one of the better precons that I've seen in quite a while. Now, if you're new to our series, first off, welcome. And secondly, what we usually do, as we said, we don't tether this upgrade to any specific list or any amounts of budgets. We give you all the best cards that are going to be for this deck, and we keep the commander the same commander that is given in the precon. Should you want to change it to the general, well, that's up to you. Now, if you look in the description below, you'll see that we'll give you a public link where you can check out the prices for all the cards that we will mention. And that way you have all the cards in one place in case you're interested in cutting and removing. And the reason why we don't give you deck lists is mainly because everybody's got their own deck, everybody's got their own collections and resources, so we don't want to limit you. We just want to make this the best deck there is. Now, if you're looking for details on how to cut this deck, what to remove, and so on and so forth, stick around to our channel as we will be posting the unboxing, opening, and review of the precon, and in there we will be explaining to you what cards we would keep and which ones we would cut. So without further ado, let's jump into the deck and let's make it kick ass. Alright, the first card that we'll be looking at is the Commander Ellivere of the Wild Court. Now this is a 4/4 human knight that costs 4, 2 generic and Selesnya, and it's quite an interesting one. I think out of the two main commanders, compared to the Fey Dominion, Ellivere is the better one of the two, mainly because whenever Ellivere attacks, it gives an aura roll any of the other creatures that you have in play, and this is a virtuous roll where the creature will get +1/+1 for all enchantments that you have on board, which is insanely strong in this kind of deck. And then the second ability is that whenever an enchanted creature you control that deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. This is whenever an enchanted creature you control. This means that if you deal combat damage to players with 4 creatures, you get to draw 4 cards. So you're not limited to just one, and that's really, really good. Now, if you're looking at this commander, it's fairly self-explanatory. All you want to do is have a lot of great enchantments. It's probably going to work off of auras, and there are quite a few good ones in the deck proper. And of course, you want to have these creatures deal damage to your opponents straight up to the face as much as you can. So this is what we will keep as a theme of the deck. Now, first and foremost, we'll start the deck with a couple of combos that you can create. And these combos are in no particular order. Should you not want to play combos, that's okay. But there are a few cards that you can have combos with. The first one being Siona, which is already in the deck proper. And this is a great one because whenever you put an aura attached to a creature that you control, you get to create a 1/1 token human soldier. Now, if you pair that up with a Shielded by Faith, then whenever the 1/1 gets created, you get to attach the Shielded by Faith to the token. Then Siona creates another token, and then the token gets attached Shielded by Faith, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. This will give you an infinite amount of tokens. Now, you can do this as many times as you want because Shielded by Faith has the May attached. Therefore, you can do this, I don't know, an infinite amount, and then just say, I'll swing with this all in the next turn or in the current turn if you can give haste to all your creatures. Therefore, this is really strong. Then if we're looking at the second combo, this is a mana generating combo. It is a 2-parter as well. It has Seed Cradle Witch and also the Sanctum Weaver. And what ends up happening is you need to have 5 mana of any one color to be generated by the Sanctum Weaver. So you can decide either white or green, and then you need to have both of these permanents in play, and also you need to have one floating of the color that you're not going to have at the beginning generated by the Sanctum Weaver. Therefore, for example, let's say you have 1 plains, you generate 5 green mana, and then what ends up happening is you get to untap the Sanctum Weaver, and then you choose to generate 5 more white mana. and then untap it again, and so on and so forth, therefore generating mana infinitely. And also for that turn, this creature is going to grow insanely big. Therefore, if you have any go wide, go home kind of things, this creature can really hurt, but it's mainly a mana generating combo. Lastly, we have a classic one. This is the Heliod Soundcrowned with the Walking Ballista. You need to have the Walking Ballista in play, and the Walking Ballista needs to have at least 2 counters on it for this to be activated. And one that ends up happening as you give lifelink to Walking Ballista with a Heliod's ability, and then you remove one of the counters from the Heliod's Ballista to make a damage to somebody, and then with Heliod you put out 1 counter on it because it just made damage to one of any target, and you get to gain a life because you just gave it lifelink. Therefore, reshuffling the counter back onto the ballista, and you can do this an infinite amount of time and just ping all your opponents, and you get infinite life and they die. Now let's have a look at creatures. As usual, we do not have a specific order for creatures, and this is going to be all the creatures that can synergize with your commander. First up, we'll start with the Walking Ballista because of the combo that we've just explained, and then we'll move on to Karametra, Gods of Harvest. It's a 6/7 enchantment, legendary enchantment creature god, and it costs 5, and it has indestructible. You need to have 7 permanents, green or white, for the devotion to kick in to make it a creature. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, you may search your library for a forest or plains card, doesn't have to be basic, and you put it in the battlefield tab, then you shuffle the library. So this is one of the ways that you can continue to access those manas and thin out the deck as much as you can. That way the next draws are gonna be more bang for your buck. Then next up we have Heliod Suncrowned. Even though you might not have this necessarily just for the combo, it's also a decent enchantment creature that allows you to make use of the lifelink and put +1/+1 counters on creatures, and there are auras that give lifelink or creatures that have lifelink already. Then another one which was introduced in the Commander Masters is Ondu Spirit Dancer, that allows you to copy any one enchantment that you want for that turn only once, and that means that you have a really strong enchantment or maybe a couple of auras, and you decide the best one, and for that turn you get to create a copy of it. Of course, if you have a legendary enchantment, then you can't do that because the legendary copy will dissipate, but still very good to get extra buffing or extra enchantment power. Then another great one introduced by the Commander Master series is the Composer of Spring. This is amazing for ramping and then eventually also to put in permanents. As Constellation, whenever enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you can put a land from hand onto the battlefield tab, but if you have 6 or more enchantments, you get to put any creature or land in a battlefield tapped, and that's amazing. One of the better creatures that was created for enchantment decks from the previous deck. And then we go over to a classic, Mesa Enchantress. It's a 0/2. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. This is a really good draw engine that really just keeps on giving. Then another great engine that was also in the Commander Masters deck is the Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and this is a great one for allowing you to ramp, playing extra lands each turn, and then giving you basic land type to every land of every type, therefore allowing you to not really worry about mana. Then another great one that was in the Commander Masters deck is the Herald of the Pantheon. This allows for all enchantment spells to cost 1 generic less to cast, and whenever you do cast an enchantment, you gain 1 life. Wonderful little creature. And then another one of the great ones that was also reprinted in Commander Masters is the Verduran Enchantress, and this is just another amazing draw engine for your deck, and it's really a must. Now, as you can see, unfortunately the previous Commander Master deck wasn't so great. It had a very good base, but it didn't pop off in any way, shape, or form. So therefore, if you bought that deck and you want an upgrade, definitely this is the way to go. I hope you haven't bought that deck and you just go ahead and buy the cards singularly so you don't get to spend too much money, because this new deck, Virtue and Valor, is much better than the Endurance Enchantments deck. But, you know, what can we do? Then another great one that was reprinted in Commander Masters is Satyr Enchanter. Whenever you cast an enchantment, you get to draw a card. As you can see, we're trying to get that engine going, and we will be able to cast those spells because we'll have a lot of creatures that allow us to pump mana in with it, not just the combo ones. But if you see, for example, here we have Birds of Paradise. It's a tier 1, tap to add mana value color. You only have 2 colors, it doesn't matter. On top of that, if you buff it with auras, it's a flyer that can be really dangerous. Then another great one that you don't necessarily need because it's really expensive, but if you have it, you can use these instead of some of the other draw engines, is the Argothian Enchantress. She has Shroud, and then whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get to draw a card. This is a wonderful one from, I think it was Urza's Legacy, maybe. Anyway, next up we have Halvar, God of Battle, and really we only care about the front of Halvar. This is a 4/4 god that costs only 4. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike, and this is really good for us. And at the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control, therefore allowing you to swap enchantment auras from one creature to the next whenever you see fit, and this is amazing. The backside we don't care about because it's an equipment. Then a great one that was introduced with the Aftermath is Calyx, Guided by Fate. This is a 2/2 that costs 3, it has Constellation, and it is an enchantment creature, legendary. Whenever it enters the battlefield or another enchantment as a battlefield under control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature, which is really good. And then when it or an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary enchantment that you control and do this only once per turn, therefore multiplying our enchantment. This is a wonderful. Then another one for the Aftermath is Danitha, New Benalia's Light. Is a 2/2 human knight that costs 3. It has Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink, and once during each of your turns you may cast an aura or equipment spell from your graveyard, and this is to allow the synergy in case your enchantments are getting removed in one way or another because your creatures die or whatever, to get them back. There are quite a few cards that allow us to do that, and this is one of them. Then we get the Esper Sentinel. Now this is a great one because you can bump it up with all the counters and all the auras, and whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, you draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is the power of the Sentinel, and because you can make it really big, eventually they won't be able to pay that cost, therefore it's an extra draw engine. Now, it's an expensive card, so don't go out and get it if you have the other draw engines. It's kind of pointless to have more than just a few. Then we get Avacyn's Pilgrim. This is a mana fixer. It adds 1 white and it costs green. Really good one. Can allow us to ramp, and we do have reasons to ramp. Then we have SRAM, Senior Artificers, a 2/2 for 2 that whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle, you get to draw a card. Again, do not use all of them, just use whatever one you have. You don't need so many past a certain point because you will be drawing your whole entire deck otherwise, and drawing into another draw is kind of pointless to a certain degree. Then we get Light Pause, Emperor's Voice, a great one for auras. This is a 2/2 that costs 2. Whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you cast it, you may search your library for an aura card with mana value less than or equal to the aura and with a different name than each aura you control, and put that card onto battlefield attached with Light Pause. And this is very good. Do keep in mind that it does not trigger if you've reanimated your enchantments in one way or another. Then another great one is Kodama of the West Tree. It's a 3/3 that costs 3. Legendary Spirit, has reach, and then modified creatures you control have trample, and this allows us to go with a second ability of our commander, therefore making it easier for us to deal damage to actual opponents. And whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a basic land card, put it in the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, so you get a 2/1 or a 3/1 with this. Then another good ramper that was recently introduced, because we do have quite a few legendary spells, is the Lighted Halfling. Very good for those legendary spells for mana. And then we have the Seed Cradle Witch, as we said before. It's good for the combo, but it is also fairly decent to just buff up a creature and untap a creature to re-enable a tap effect should you wish it. And a decent one that's not the strongest, but it's quite good if you can bring it back over and over, is Alseid of Light Spawning. It's a 1/1 for 1, has lifelink, and you can sacrifice it to give target creature enchantment you control protection from a caller until the end of the turn, and then if you bring him back, you can do this, so on and so forth, so many times as you please. Now we get Helios Pilgrim, which is basically a tutor for auras, and this is a really great card. You play it, enters the battlefield, you search for an aura, you put it in your hand and shuffle the library. Amazing. And we will be using tutors in this deck because it's quite important to get those enchantments. Then we get Siona, Captain of the Pyles, and this is a token generator. There are some token generator cards and you can go that way. It's always great. I wouldn't focus too much on the token generation, though I would keep it more as is in auras, and I would make tokens as a byproduct. There are quite a few creatures that do that. Then we get Catilda Dawnheart Martyr. This is a great little card. This costs 3. It has star, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of permanents you control that are either spirits or enchantments. It has flying, lifelink, and protection for vampires if you want. And then once it dies, you can pay the disturb cost of 5, and it flips around, becoming an aura that gives flying, lifelink, and protection for vampires, and +X equals to the number of spirits or enchantments that you control. And then if the creature would die and the aura would go into the graveyard, you have to exile it. Therefore, you get the ability twice, whether on the creature or onto another creature. So that's really good. Then a great one that was recently introduced in the latest expansion is Archon of the Wild Rose. It's a 4/4 with flying that makes all the creatures that you have that are enchanted by auras, base power and toughness 4/4 and flying. So this is an insane go-wise strategy. If you have a lot of tokens or just a lot of small creatures that get powered off, this one will make it insanely strong if they have aura. So this is going to be a key card for enchantment decks all around, and definitely want to get a hold of. Then we get Spellbook Vendor should you want it. It's a 2/2 vigilance for 2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 1 generic, and if you do, you create a sorcerer roll token to target creature you control. And sorcerer, all it does, it gives +1/+1, and whenever that creature attacks, you scry 1. This is one way to give more rolls and auras, but it's not necessary if you don't want to and have better cards. And another good one is Elvish Archivist. It's a 0/1 for 2. Whenever one or more artifacts enter the battlefield under control, we don't care about that, but whenever more enchantments enter the battlefield under control, you get to draw a card. The ability only triggers once. Again, this is only if you haven't gotten a hold of the other good draw creature. Then another decent one is Yenna Red Tooth Regent. Is a 4/4 for 2 generic and tap it. Choose target enchantment you control that doesn't have the same name as another permanent you control, which means that you just can't copy a token. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it isn't legendary, and if the token is an aura, untap this creature and then scry 2 and activate only as a sorcery. And therefore you can see here that if you have ways to untap and pump a lot of mana into things, you can do this over and over, and that's really good. And that settles it for a creature side of our deck. It's a wonderful little deck. It's going to be tough for you to figure out which cards you really want to put in because of the great amount of cards that actually exist in the deck. Now, let's have a look at artifacts. And funny enough, this time around, we're not going to go that heavy on artifacts. Now, usually we don't even give you any idea of using Moxen, Mana Vaults, and Jewel Lotuses and all of that stuff, because we really don't see the need for most decks unless there are decks that require it, and this deck does not require any of them. On top of that, it doesn't really require a lot of artifacts because your power is all in enchantment. So some of the artifacts that you can get are either the Swiftfoot Boots or the Lightning Greaves, which allow you to protect some creatures that, for example, like our commander, you want to be able to keep alive for as long as you can. And then we get some way of mixing up the mana. We have the Selesnya Signet, pretty self-explanatory, and the Talisman of Unity, which is pretty good. And then we have the Helm of the Gods, which I think is actually the best artifact that you can get, which gives the equipped creature +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. It only costs 1 generic, and it costs only 1 generic to equip. So this is definitely the artifact to get if you're going to use artifact. Now let's have a look at the enchantments. Of course, the deck comes with a lot of great auras and a lot of great enchantments, but there can always be better. So we start off with Rancor, previously introduced, I think, in the Reviewers blog. Maybe this one was Legacy as well, or I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. Rancor gives a creature +2/+0 and trample, which enables the second ability of our commander, and then whenever it is put into graveyard, you put it back into your hand, therefore always having the ability to enchant somebody for just 1 mana. Then, even though it's a bit expensive, but we do have ways to ramp, we have Privileged Position, which costs 5, and other permanents you control have hexproof. Now, this is not a necessity for the deck, but it's a great enchantment because giving hexproof to your whole entire board, not just creatures, is really good in general for Commander game. Next up, we have Exploration, which is another great way to keep putting ramp into your deck. Then we get Shielded by Faith, which, as I said, is not bad because you can move it around and give indestructible to whatever creature you may have, but it also enables the combo. Then we get Sphere of Safety, which is kind of a little bit of a moat Should your opponents wish to attack you, they cannot attack you unless, or a planeswalker you control, unless they control press X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So it's a very, very effective mode that you really might want to have in your deck. Then we get Aura Shards, the great enchantment that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may destroy a target artifact or enchantment. And this is just an amazing, amazing card for enchantment decks, because this allows you to wipe a lot of decks synergies and also ramp, because artifacts and enchantment are the bread and butter for most commander decks, as you might know. Now we get All That Glitters, which I was kind of surprised that it wasn't in this deck, but it's already very good. All That Glitters, it's a fairly cheap card that gives +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment to target creature, and it's a really great aura. Then one of the greatest enchantment of all time, Smothering Tithe. This allows you to ramp as much as you can, and it's always present in all my white decks. It's not a necessity, you already have ways to ramp, but this is one of the great ones to do so for free, basically, every turn and every time your opponents cast their spells, if they don't pay the cost. Then we get Boon of the Spirit Realm, which is actually introduced by the Commander Masters, and it costs 5 and it has Constellation. So whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you put a blessing counter on it, and then for each blessing counter, your creatures get +1/+1. And this is realistically a Door of Destinies, but for enchantments, which is really, really good if you're going tribal, if you're going white, if you're going token, or if you're just using a lot of creatures like this deck will want you to do. Now we get the Sigil of the Empty Throne, which is also in the Commander Masters deck, and it's a 5-coster enchantment, and whenever you cast an enchantment, you create a 4/4 white angel with flying, and this is just amazing because you have enchantments that you can just pile on extra tokens, and it's flying, so they go above most of the defense line of your opponents, therefore enabling the draw from your commander. Then another decent one that is not necessary, but it's a good one, is Mirari's Wake. It gives all creatures you control +1/+1, and whenever you tap a land for mana, you add 1 more mana that land could produce. Really good for ramping, but not necessary. Still, it's a very good card that I would use if possible, because it does both an anthem and ramping at the same time. Then we go with Sigarda's Aid, a great enchantment. You may cast aura and equipment spells as though as they had flash, therefore going in defensive or really sneaky, depending on how your opponent's board are. It costs only 1 white, and whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to another creature you control. Now we don't really care about the equipment part, but the first part is really great to give flash to your enchantments, because then it makes basically 5 spells out of your enchantment aura. Then we get Spear Mantle, which is a great little aura that not only gives +1/+1 to a creature, but also protection from creatures, therefore allowing you to just go to the face to your opponents unless they destroy that creature. Wonderful. Then another great one is Armadillo Cloak. It only costs 3 and has that it gives +2/+2 to target creature and trample, and whenever an enchanted creature deals combat damage, you gain damage life. So it has lifelink, and that's really good as there are synergies for both of that, both the trample and the lifelink, as we've explained. Then a great one, that's another great one for the draw effect, and again, if you have too many, there's no point, that's fine, is Season of Growth. This allows you to scry 1 whenever a creature enters the battlefield on your control, and whenever you cast a spell that targets a creature that you control, you get to draw a card, and again, your auras are going to be targeting your creatures, and therefore you get to draw even more cards should you want to. Then another interesting one is the Sterling Grove. Cost 2. Other enchantments you control have Shroud, and this, be careful, it means you cannot target them as well. And then for 1, you can sacrifice it, and then you tutor for any enchantment that you want, and you put the card on top of your library. Wonderful little card for both abilities should you be playing against decks that interact with your board a lot, or in general if you just want to tutor a specific enchantment. And we get Hallowed Haunting, which is really great. Cost 4 as long as you have 7 or more enchantments, which is fairly quick in your deck. Creatures you control have flying and vigilance, and then whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you create creature token that has power and toughness equal to the amount of spirits you control. which is a spirit as well. So therefore, it slowly grows to be a great creature. So it's really good for just token generation. And we care more about the first part. Then we have a new card, the Tale for the Ages. It costs 2, and enchanted creatures you control get +2/+2. So really good anthem for enchantment. And that really settles it for our enchantment slot. And now we will move on to instants. Now, what we want to do with our board is be able to protect it. We care to interact a little bit with the opponent's board just in case they have something nasty, but at the same time, we want to be able to protect it. And one of the great spells to do that is Teferi's Protection. For 1 turn of the table, you get to flicker everything out of existence, there, including yourself. Therefore, this is one of the great protection spells that I always try to use in my white decks. Another great one for protection is Flawless Maneuver, that is free whenever you control your commander, and creatures you control gain indestructible until the end of turn. Wonderful card for protection. And another one that wasn't actually inside the deck, but it is good as a spot removal, is Path to Exile. Definitely something that I would add on top of the Swords to Plowshares. Wonderful little removal. Then we get Heroic Intervention, another instant to intervene and make for a turn everything on your side indestructible and hexproof. So in case somebody is going to be nasty for 1 turn, then you can deal with it. Then alongside other removals, we get the Beast Within, another great spot removal. You give them a 3/3, and look, that wonderful huge creature that you just spent, I don't know, 10 mana on is now a 3/3. Yeah, of course, you're destroying the creature, not actually transforming it. It's not an Oko, but still is pretty good. Then we move on to tutors, and usually we don't care about tutors as much unless they synergize with our deck. And well, you're using a lot of enchantments, so you really want to have the Enlightened Tutor. You'd really need to go and fetch those enchantments that are going to spearhead you into the next few things. And whether it's draw, whether it's buffing up things, whether it's protecting yourself, whatever it may be, and the Enlightened Tutor does just that. So it's a wonderful card. Then another great one that was introduced in the Aftermath is Cosmic Rebirth. Great little card to go and fetch something out of your graveyard that is 3 or less. And of course, a lot of this auras that you're going to be using are going to be fairly cheap, so you can fetch some of the good ones that might have just been destroyed for whatever reason. Another great protection spell is Clever Concealment. You have Convoke. It allows you to phase out until the next turn any number of non-land permanents. That's really, really great. So you protect your board, and it has Convoke, so you have a lot of token generators as well, so it won't be too hard to cast. Then another great one that is going to be, I believe, starting to make the rounds and removing permanents is Stroke of Midnight. For only 3, you destroy target non-land permanent, and they get a 1/1 white human creature token. And this is great because usually you have Generous Gift that gives them a 3/3. This actually gives them a 1/1. So yeah, it's an upgraded Generous Gift. Next up, we're going to move to Sorceries, and we'll start off with some way to fix your mana. Hopefully you won't have too much trouble in being able to cast your stuff, but should you have to, Kodama's Reach is one of those cards. You search your library for up to 2 basic line cards, reveal them, you put 1 in the hand and 1 in the battlefield tap, and then you shuffle. Pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory, but if you don't need mana fixing, then don't play it. Same thing for Nature's Lore, except that this one allows you to search for any forest card, and it can be any of the dual lands. 3 Visits does the same thing as Nature's Lore, so it's self-explanatory. Then we get Open the Armory, which is a sorcery. It costs only 2. Search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. Another way to tutor one of those auras. That's going to be really good. Then we have Resurgent Belief that allows you to suspend for 2 turns and then return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is a great way to return those enchantments that you've lost, and it's not that expansive either. Another way to do that is Brilliant Restoration. Now this is going to be a lot more expensive, and do play this only if you have a lot of ramp, because you're going to need a lot of white. Quadruple white is a lot, but if you don't have any of the other spells, this can be a way to achieve it. Then we get Farewell, one of the great removals of all time. It allows you to board wipe everything that you want, which is exile any of the important pieces, permanents of the game, and it's always present in my white deck. You do get Austere Command, but you can only choose 2 with that one. Then we get Idyllic Tutor, which is a great one for tutoring. Again, another enchantment, wonderful. And then we have a classic from from Urza's Destiny, this is Replenish. It costs 4 sorcery and returns all enchantment cards from the graveyard into play. Then we'll have a look at Planeswalkers, and realistically, you only need one Planeswalker, which was previously reprinted in the Commander Masters deck, and this is Calyx, Destiny's Hand. It's a legendary Planeswalker that costs 4, has 4 loyalty. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. By +1ing them, you may reveal an enchantment card from among them, put that card in your hand, put the rest of the bottom of the library in a random order. Then for -3, you exile target creature enchantment you don't control until target enchantment you control is the battlefield, effectively making anything a prison on the board, even though it's not a prison. And then for -7, you return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Another little great card that I really love playing, and I think you should definitely try and get this one in the deck. And that's it for Planeswalkers. You don't have a lot of synergy with Planeswalkers and enchantments. Now let's have a look at the land slot. Now when we look at the lands, we look at the utility lands. We don't really care for the mana lands because everybody has their own mana base. So we'll start off with Reliquary Tower. Now you have no maximum hand size, and since you'll be drawing quite a lot depending on how you build the deck, this is really important. And another good one is Rogue's Passage. Because of your commander's ability, you want to be able to hit base, and sometimes you just don't have ways to do that, and this is one way to do it should you be in a pickle, or should you have something really big that you really want to hit with. Then a great one is Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, making all the lands or as pretty self-explanatory or allowing you to mana fix. Then another great one is Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. Depending on your devotion to a specific color, you add that many of that color of mana. Wonderful, and it's really important in this kind of decks. And as I said, you really need to ramp up to cast some of those spells. And then we have a couple of really expensive lands that are not necessary here, but they're really good in these decks, and one of them is Gaia's Cradle. Kind of self-explanatory. You tap to add 1 green to your mana pool for each creature you control. Yeah, this is great. And then another one is Serra's Sanctum. You add 1 white to your mana pool for each enchantment you control. If you have both on board, well, you shouldn't have that many problems with mana unless you get board wipe. And that's it for our precon upgrade video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it helped. Now let us know in the comments down below if we missed out something. Maybe you thought about something that we didn't think about, or maybe you already knew some combos that we didn't think about. Either way, let us know down below. I read and reply to every single one of our comments. And also make sure to stick around to the channel because we will be unboxing everything Wilds of Eldraine and bringing you more guides like these. So we hope you've enjoyed this from Scotty and I. We really thank you very much. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps small channels like ours quite a lot. And until the next video, we wish you a good one. Be good, be kind, have a good day, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!